Hello and welcome to another episode of Guess That Record. I am your host, Jackson Reed. This is the show where we talk about music and try to figure out which album I pulled from my collection. This episode is a special one because it's just going to be an interview. Our guest is a successful musician from my hometown of Calgary, Alberta. He is best known for being the original drummer for Three Dog Night, a role which he held from 1968 to 1974, returning for a second stint with the group from 1981 to 1984. He's also performed with groups such as SS Fools, the Ohio Players, and Tommy Chong's band Little Daddy and the Bachelors. I'm very happy to welcome Floyd Sneed to Guess That Record. All right, so how are you doing, Floyd?
I'm doing good, thanks. I've been through a little health thing, but I'm fine. I'm okay.
That's good. Well, it's great to be interviewing you, and it's funny how quickly this all came together. I just found out about you literally the other day. I was reading about Three Dog Night. I couldn't believe that you were from Calgary, and I just knew I had to talk to you for that reason alone, because I've heard songs like Joy to the World my whole life, and it's cool how someone
Very good, I understand.
Yeah, it was cool how someone from my hometown played a part in all of those hits. Now, I always like to do some preparation for these interviews, and one of the most interesting things I read about you is that you have quite the connection to the history of Alberta. You're a descendant of the Amber Valley settlement. For those who don't know, Amber Valley is north of Edmonton and was one of the first black settlements in Alberta made up of African Americans from the southern U.S. who immigrated to Canada. I thought it was so cool to hear that you were a descendant from there. I'd be curious to learn a bit more about your roots there and then how your family ended up in Calgary.
Well, all I know is from being a child, my parents moved from the south, deep south, up to Alberta, Edmonton, Alberta area.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a settlement was started called Amber Valley that you just mentioned. And that's where I was born and grew up, basically.
Okay. And then you guys ended up down in Calgary?
In Calgary, that's right.
Now, as a kid growing up in Calgary, what do you remember what area of the city you lived in?
Well, just around in the East Calgary area.
Okay. Yeah.
About 4 blocks from the Stampede grounds at 4th Street and 12th Avenue Southeast. That's where I live.
Okay. Yeah.
All my childhood here.
I was just gonna say it's interesting because really the only person that I know that would have been in Calgary at that time you were growing up is my grandma, but she grew up in Mount Royal, so like the ritzy part of town, basically.
The ritzy part. I was just gonna say her family must have had a few dollars.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool to hear. How you were around at that same time, growing up in a completely different part of town. And it kind of leads into my other question because I find in today's world Calgary is quite a diverse city. There's a lot of different groups here that are more represented now, which is a great thing. But I have to imagine that when you were growing up, it was very white and not diverse at all. So
absolutely.
What was it like?
Absolutely.
Yeah, what was it like being in a black family in Calgary at that time?
Very white. As you were saying, a lot of Caucasian people there, when we grew up. But there was a few, my cousins and a few other couple of Chinese kids, but it was very, not that diverse, so. But I had no problem in Calgary. I had no problem at all.
Right. Yeah. I guess, obviously you ended up getting into music, but when you were growing up in Calgary, did you have any other interests? Like, did you play sports at all or anything?
I played all kinds of sports. I played a lot of ice hockey.
Nice.
In the Inglewood area.
Oh, yeah.
I played hockey. I played hockey for about from 7, 8 years old to 15, 16, something like that. So I played quite a bit of hockey in Calgary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Hockey's my favorite sport, so that's pretty cool to hear.
Yes,
Now, your initial interest in music came from your parents, is that correct?
Yes, I played in church, quite a bit.
Right.
My mother played, and my dad played a little guitar and piano, so I picked up some of my music roots from them.
Okay.
But, yeah.
And when did you start playing drums?
When I was about, let's say, 14, 15 years old, so I could afford to buy my own drums.
Okay, so you started a little
Yeah.
started a little later then.
A little later. Uh-huh.
Right. What was it about drums that made you gravitate towards them?
Well, my brother used to be in a band before I was even interested in music, and they used to practice at my house. And I got very interested in the drummers that my brother had used in his couple of bands. I want to play the drums. When I get a little older, I'm going to have to go buy my own drums, and that's what I did. And practiced and got a little better, joined a couple of bands around Calgary, and just went from there.
Right. And I have to think that when you were growing up, Calgary probably didn't have any ability to sort of expose you to different types of music, really. How were you eventually exposed to genres like rock and roll, for example?
Well, actually, there was just basically all country in Calgary at that time.
Yeah.
But a group from Edmonton used to come down to Calgary called West Dacus and the Club 93 Rebels. They used to come down and play at the Gardens quite often. That's where I got interested in music with the drummers they had in their bands, So that's how I got really interested in drums, from the old-time big band drummers and these drummers that used to come with these other bands from Edmonton, So
Now, with your sort of early bands that you were in, what was it sort of difficult to get shows if you weren't like a country band?
Well, we were just starting at that time, too. We weren't very experienced.
Mm-hmm.
But we had to have a little bit of knowledge and experience before we got into the Gardens, because that was the place to play in Calgary, at that time.
Now, I guess you could call it sort of your first break into the music industry, but you were in the same circle with another famous Calgarian, Tommy Chong, and you ended up in his band Little Daddy and the Bachelors.
That's right.
I understand Tommy was married to your sister as well. So is that where your connection?
Right.
That's where your connection with Tommy starts?
One way, one of the ways where I got into music was playing with Tommy.
I thought it was interesting to see that that Little Daddy and the Bachelors ended up becoming Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers, who recorded for Motown.
That's right.
That's right. Uh-huh. And you split with them before that change occurred, right?
Yes, I did. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot, but yes.
And after that, you decided to move to Los Angeles, which, of course, ended up being a very good move.
That's right. I knew that Los Angeles was the place for music. And so after a couple of jobs I had in Calgary, I decided just to go down to Los Angeles. And that's what I did. And, met musicians in a couple of different bands and finally ended up in Three Dog Night.
Yeah. And I was going to say, so in 1968, you ended up meeting Danny Hutton, Chuck Negron, and Corey Wells, who are, of course, the lead singers of Three Dog Night. How did you get introduced to them?
Well, I was working in a band at the Gardens with my little band I had at that time.
Back in Calgary.
And one night, yes, and one night we were playing, and one of the bands, one of the members of Three Dog Night happened to come in, and at that time they were looking for a drummer. They had all the instruments in their band except the drummer. So they liked one of the guys that came that night from Three Dog Night, liked the way I played and introduced himself and said, "They're looking for a drummer. Might I be interested?" And I was, because they already had management and they had a record company waiting for the whole band to get together to record. So I jumped on that right away, and we recorded and had our first hit record and went on from there.
There you go. I was reading that the first official Three Dog Night show was at the famous Whiskey A Go Go in Hollywood. Do you have any recollection of that performance?
That's right. Wow. Where'd you find that out?
I was just doing my research.
Well, very good. You were doing it. Yeah, that's one of our first gigs in the limelight, so to speak, we played.
Right.
Whiskey A Go Go.
That's pretty cool. That's a good place to play.
It is.
I'd love to break down some of the big hits with Three Dog Night with you, but before doing that, I just wanted to ask you like what it was like to be in LA in that period because
Hmm.
for me the late '60s, early '70s was kind of like my starting point with music, and s-
That was a lot the basic starting point for music.
yeah,
Uh, the R&B. I'll say the top 40 records are starting to get very popular besides country music in Calgary.
hmm
So we got in at a great time in music.
yeah.
So,
And
yeah,
you hear so much about LA in that period because in a lot of ways it was the center of the music business and it kind of still is to this day.
that's
So
right.
yeah, just like what was it like being in that scene at that time?
It was really interesting. You're not in Calgary anymore,
Yeah.
and then you were in a place that was alive with the movie industry and music.
hmm
So we're in the right place to get something going on. So we're very happy to be in Los Angeles.
Right. And
Yeah,
also reading about that era, it kind of seems like all the musicians were kind of living in like, Laurel Canyon and the canyons up in the hills there. Is that
yeah,
were you spending time up there?
absolutely.
Yeah,
A couple of the guys in the band lived in Laurel Canyon.
cool,
Also, the bass player Joe Sherman lived in the canyon, and Timmy Greenspoon, the organist,
cool.
keyboard player, and one of the singers who lived on the bottom of Laurel Canyon.
This episode of Guess That Record is sponsored by GuitarWorks. One of Canada's top independent music stores for over 30 years, GuitarWorks carries a huge selection of musical instruments from the biggest brands in music, including Gibson, Fender, Martin, Yamaha, and Paul Reed Smith. Visit any of their 3 Calgary locations or shop online at guitarworks.ca and join the Guitar Perks program to earn money back with every purchase. GuitarWorks, your total guitar store. This episode of Guess That Record is also sponsored by Marvel Marketing. Marvel Marketing is an award winning digital marketing company headquartered in Calgary, Alberta, working with clients in different industries from all over North America, including Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Marvel Marketing services include website design and development, website maintenance, search engine optimization, public relations services, and social media management, amongst others. To find out more, visit marvelmarketing.ca. This episode of Guess That Record is also sponsored by Recordland, home to the largest selection of music in Canada. Buy, sell, and trade tapes, CDs, and vinyl. Located in Calgary's Inglewood neighborhood on 9th Avenue Southeast, visit them in person or online at recordlandcalgary.com. You can also follow them on Instagram at recordlandcalgary. And I thought it would be fun to go over a few Three Dog Night songs, just to sort of hear your perspective on how they came to be. And the first top 5 hit for the band was One. Um,
Yeah.
so, what was your reaction to that song sort of becoming the first big hit for you guys? And did you have a feeling it was going to
Well,
be successful?
well, we had a pile of records that different songwriters would send in, hoping that we'd pick their song and do it, record it.
Yeah.
And I can't quite remember who wrote the one at the moment, but that was one of the songs that we played right away and said, that sounds like a hit song gone our way. And so we recorded it, and we recorded it the way we wanted to play it, the musicians and the singers, and it became a hit song. And that's what we did with basically all the songs that we played, and made hits. They're songs that other writers wrote and sent to us.
I wanted to bring up that One was actually written by Harry Nilsson. The
Harry Nilsson, that's right.
Yeah,
No, that's right.
very
That's
fa-
right.
Mm-hmm. And after One, you guys reached the top of the charts for the first time with "Mama Told Me Not to Come," and
Yeah,
I was quite surprised when I saw that Randy Newman wrote that song because I'm a huge fan
that's
of Randy, and that
right. Yeah.
fact kind of slipped past me that he wrote that one. How did
Mhm.
that song end up with you guys?
Well, I can't tell you how we. Well, we had a dub of that song that it was sent to us from his people, I guess, and it was basically just a rough version of that song. And so we re-recorded, put our own thing to that song, and it became a hit. So you know,
And then the next year, you guys released "Joy to the World," which for me it might be sort of the defining Three Dog Night song because it's usually the one I think of when I think of Three Dog Night.
well, that happens to be our biggest record seller.
Yeah,
So thanks for that.
and it was written by Hoyt Axton, and
That's right.
I heard a story that it was originally written to be the theme song for a children's TV show, but I'm not sure if that's correct or not.
I'm not sure now about that,
Right.
but I think you're pretty close to it. But I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
Yeah, all good. And the other cool thing about "Joy to the World" is that you actually sing on it. You have the sort of
Oh yeah,
the really low harmony.
I think based on it,
Yeah. Did you ever have a desire to sing more, or were you just happy being the drummer?
I'm happy being the drummer. Same background, so that's where I'm at.
Right. And
Yeah.
I was impressed on that record, like how deep you can sing there. Has your singing voice always sort of been bassy like that?
I've always had a deep voice, so.
Yeah. And an old-fashioned love song. That was a song that was written by Paul Williams, and he wrote for the Carpenters and the Muppets, to name a few.
That's right.
Did you guys just was it the same sort of process where like his songs just kind of ended up being passed along to you, and then you went from there?
And then we just put our own version to everything we received.
Another Hoyt Axton song from you guys that I like is "Never Been to Spain."
Well, there you go.
Yeah. I think that one's got a really cool sound to it.
Thank you. I love that. My favorite too. Yeah. Never Been to Spain.
Yeah, and it feels almost like a mix between maybe like a country song and an early Elton John song, in a way.
Oh, that's a good combination. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Now, the group's final #1 hit came in 1972, which was "Black and White."
Wow.
That was originally a Pete Seeger song, I believe.
I think so, but I'm not sure about that. But that's one of my favorite songs.
And it's that one. Obviously, yeah, that was your third #1 in 3 years, which is quite an impressive feat. Quite an impressive feat.
Yeah. That was a great. I really that song. I love all our hit songs. So we spent a lot of time recording them and making them, put them our own thing to every song. Our own version. So
yeah. I also wanted to ask about Shambala because that's another one that I would sort of consider to be a defining song for Three Dog Night.
Me too. Yes.
It was one of the group's last big hits, reaching #3 in 1973. And that one was just like the others, where it just came to you guys and then you went at it.
That's right. That's right.
I was going to ask, when you were in the studio, what was the process like of making a song back in those days? Because obviously it's a very different process than it is today.
Well, we had a very good time in the studio. We had a whole pile of records to decide which ones we wanted to record. But we had a good time in the studio, just putting our own style to all these records that we would put out. So we just had a good time going through all these piles of 45s that record companies would send us and personal songwriters. So we picked and choose the one that we thought that that we could do a good job recording.
Right. And back in those days, of course, everything was done on tape. So I guess as the drummer, was it basically like you had to kind of nail a perfect take pretty quickly so that you didn't waste too much tape, or?
Well, most of the time we had to probably play a song 4 or 5 times just to get it right. Not that any instrument needed to be picked out and done over again, the whole thing had to be together, you know.
Yeah.
But we had a time picking out the songs and recording them. Sometimes we had to record the same song maybe 5, 6 times, maybe 7, you know, just to get it right. But it was fun, so it was no problem at all.
Yeah. And did you record like live all together at the same time?
No, yes, we did. Not all the time, but most of the time we sang together. That's how you can get the original sound from everything. You know, everybody doing it together. Even if there may be a little mistake here and there, it didn't come through to the public.
Right.
You know, but that's where we did things basically all together at once, so we get the feel right, and you know, just to get everything copacetic.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
listening to all the Three Dog Night hit, like all of these songs in preparation for this interview, it got me asking a question to myself. What is the style of Three Dog Night?
It's individualized. We have our own style, our own sound. We didn't sound like anybody, and we didn't sing like anybody, and that was our thing.
Yeah.
Three Dog Night.
I do feel like, though, there is almost a kind of swampy southern feel to a lot of the songs.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll go for that.
Yeah. Another thing that that kind of struck me when doing research for the interview was that you guys a lot of the time you didn't write your own songs. You were given songs. How come that was the case?
Nobody in the band was really a songwriter, so to speak. A completed song that was ready to record, but there was really nobody in the band that wrote a complete song that was valuable enough to record.
Right.
So we just did other material and songs, you know. So nobody was against that.
Yeah. Well, it definitely worked. It worked for you guys. So there's
yes, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you some questions about your drumming style. I found a concert film of Three Dog Night performing in Rochester, I believe, in about 1970, and I watched your drum solo, and I felt like you had a lot of power to your playing, and I also noticed at one point you ditched the drumsticks and started bashing the drums with your hands, and the only other drummer I've seen do that is John Bonham from Led Zeppelin.
So I tried to copy a lot of his style a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
My favorite drummers, you know, Led Zeppelin is one of the best groups ever.
I also noticed in that same solo, you were playing with a traditional grip instead of sort of the more common match grip that you usually see drummers use. So where did you sort of learn those kinds of techniques?
From different, I picked up a lot of jazz drummers' licks. You know, I listened to a lot of jazz drummers because they did everything, you know, the jazz drummers.
Yeah.
And that's how I picked up a lot of my drum licks. Drum licks is my style, so to speak.
Right.
You know, so I listened to a lot of jazz drummers and some rock drummers, but I picked most of my style up from jazz drummers.
I think that is the guys who know what they're doing. I feel like always kind of go to jazz in order to sort of get better. So yeah.
Exactly. That's right.
And I also wanted to ask you about your drum setup, specifically from that 1970 show that I was watching. I noticed your tom setup was quite interesting because you had them set up in almost like a triangle, which I thought was kind of unique. I don't know if I've never seen a drum kit like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was a show-off man. You know, I wanted to have the biggest drums and the most tom-toms of anybody out there. But I just had them angled so I can hit them easily, you know. So that's another way I set up my drums with the way I wanted to set up my drums.
Right.
To make it easy for me.
Yeah. And in terms of like kits that you've used, do you have you always sort of used like the same brand of drums your whole career, or have you mixed things up over the years?
No, I use Rogers, Ludwig, the air, um, 4 or 5 different sets of drums, different drum companies. So
I also wanted to know what was it sort of like to tour with Three Dog Night back in the day, because
oh, yeah,
the early 70s is probably like the pinnacle of concert
yeah,
experiences. So
right.
yeah, what was it like to be on the road with one of the top hit making groups of the era?
It was wonderful on the road. I've been around the world almost 1.5 times.
Right.
You know, playing all these different countries with Three Dog Night. I'm the drummer, the show off. So I loved it. I enjoyed all of that. A lot of work, but
Hmm.
it was more fun than work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
uh-huh.
I did some digging, and I saw that Three Dog Night played at the Stampede Corral in Calgary
Yeah,
3 times in 1970, 1971, and 1974. Do you have any
something like that.
Do you have any recollection of
Oh,
those
yeah,
performances?
absolutely. When I was just a kid, to sneak in the Stampede Grill for hockey matches and whatever event was going on, we knew how to pick the locks. We knew how to pick the locks at that time to get in. I remember them building the Stampede Corral and selling the construction workers Kool-Aid.
Wow.
So,
It's yeah. Unfortunately, the corral they tore it down last year, I believe,
yeah,
because
right, right.
they're building a new convention center on the same site. But yeah, I got to spend some time in there myself. It always felt like you were going back in time.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
But I have to imagine that coming back and playing there with Three Dog Night just would have been amazing to sort of come back to Calgary as a conquering hero like that.
Oh, yeah. Calgary thought I was big time at that when I come back to the Stampede Grill. You're playing here? You guys are the biggest band in the world. I said, well, we're from Calgary. I wanted to be here. I love Calgary, so here we are.
There you go. Awesome.
Enjoy it while you can.
Yeah. Now, in 1975, you and guitarist Michael Alsop and bassist Joe Shermy left
Yeah,
Three Dog Night, and you formed the band SS Fools,
that's right.
along with Bobby Kimball, who would find later success with Toto. Was the goal of SS Fools to sort of step out of the shadows of Three Dog Night and make a name for yourselves?
Absolutely, absolutely. That was a very good band. Our own style, our own style, and that's what happened. We get our own style.
Mm-hmm.
Three Dog Night style.
Yeah. In the early 80s, you rejoined Three Dog Night for one more run with the band. And during that time, you guys put out an EP called "It's a Jungle,"
Oh, uh-huh.
and
That's a good.
I listened to that record, and I thought, like, man, this is a pretty good little EP. It's lots of sort of interesting new wave elements and some reggae and stuff. But it was
Yeah.
it was very different from anything that Three Dog Night had done to that point. Was the goal of that record
Mhm.
to try and reinvent the band for a new era?
That's right. Just try to do this a different way, some other, you know. Every record's a little different than the record before because you're trying different things, and that's what we did.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Now, I understand that you've also done quite a bit of painting as well.
yes, that's what I'm painting today, as a matter of fact.
Oh,
Trying
good.
to get started on a new painting. I found a few paintings on my internet,
Right.
but that's what I'm doing in some of my spare time is this little artwork, So
How did you get into
that's
that?
what I'm self-taught there also, So
And what kind of painting techniques do you use? Like, are you oil or
I do oil pastels. I do color markers. I have a variety of different paints and colors I use. So I use a mixture of all kinds of things to paint with.
We have reached the end of the interview here. So I'd like to thank Floyd Sneed for taking the time to be on the show today. Once again, it's just so cool to see a Calgary boy that's played on some very famous recordings. So I really appreciate getting the chance to speak with you.
Let's do it again sometime.
Sure, yeah. I also quickly wanted to say thanks to John Zeka. John is currently working on a documentary called Kite on a String, which is all about Bobby Kimball. And he allowed us to play some SS Fools on today's episode. So I wanted to say thanks to John, and you should go check out his documentary when it comes out in January of 2023. And as always, I'd like to thank you, the listeners, for tuning in. The more you listen, the more often we'll be able to produce fantastic episodes. Also, tell your friends about us. If you know anyone that likes music, get them to check us out. We're also on Instagram at Guess That Record, so make sure to follow us there for updates and additional content. Remember to keep rocking, and we'll see you on the next episode of Guess That Record.